Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee as it grew cold. The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic outside their downtown loft. His wife, Rebecca, was still asleep, or pretending to be. He'd learned to tell the difference over their 6 years of marriage. His phone buzzed. Another message from Rebecca's best friend, Kyle. Daniel didn't need to read it to know what it said. The pattern was always the same. Casual inside jokes, references to conversations Daniel wasn't part of, the kind of easy intimacy that used to exist only between him and Rebecca. "Morning," Rebecca said, appearing in the hallway wearing one of his old college shirts. She looked beautiful, even disheveled from sleep, her dark hair falling across her shoulders. "Morning," Daniel replied, watching as she immediately reached for her phone. She smiled at the screen, that particular smile that used to be reserved for him. "Kyle's being ridiculous again. You remember that story about his ex? Well, now she launched into an animated explanation that Daniel had heard variations of dozens of times. "Becca," he interrupted gently. "It's 7 in the morning. So, we're talking about my friend. Your friend who texts you at midnight. Your friend who knows more about your day than I do." Rebecca's expression hardened. "Daniel, we've been through this. He's just a friend. You're being insecure again." The word again stung like a slap. As if his discomfort was a character flaw, something to be diagnosed and dismissed. "I'm not insecure. I'm asking for boundaries." "What boundaries? We're just talking." She grabbed her coffee mug with more force than necessary. "God, I can't have friends. I can't have a life outside this marriage." "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying, Daniel? Because it sounds like you want to control who I talk to." The argument followed its familiar script. Daniel would express discomfort, Rebecca would accuse him of being controlling, and eventually, he'd back down to keep the peace. By the time she left for work at the marketing firm, they'd reached the usual stalemate, his concerns dismissed, her friendship with Kyle unquestioned. That evening, Daniel met his colleague Trevor for drinks at their usual bar, a quiet place with exposed brick walls and dim lighting. Trevor had been his friend since college, one of those rare friendships that survived distance and life changes. "She's still texting that guy?" Trevor asked, nursing his whiskey. "Constantly." Daniel traced the rim of his glass. "And I'm the problem for noticing." "Man, that's rough. Lisa would lose her mind if I had someone like that." "Rebecca says I'm overthinking. That I'm insecure." Trevor was quiet for a moment. "You know what's funny? The same people who tell you you're overthinking are usually the ones who'd lose it if the situation was reversed." That observation stayed with Daniel long after they'd parted ways. As he drove home through the city lights, he thought about the double standard, the way Rebecca's rules seemed to apply only to him. She could have intimate friendships that made him uncomfortable, but his discomfort itself was the violation. When he got home, Rebecca was already asleep, her phone face down on the nightstand, always face down lately. Daniel stood in the doorway watching her, feeling the distance between them grow wider with each passing day. Something had to change. He just didn't know what yet. The change came 3 weeks later, though Daniel didn't plan it. He was working late at the architectural firm, finalizing designs for a commercial complex, when Emma Rodriguez from the legal department stopped by his desk. They'd spoken a few times in passing. She was sharp, funny, and had a directness Daniel appreciated. "Still here?" she asked, holding 2 cups of coffee from the break room. "Figured you could use this. You're a lifesaver." Daniel accepted gratefully, noticing how her presence immediately lightened his mood. "Rough project." "Rough everything, honestly." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Emma pulled up a chair, her expression softening. "Want to talk about it?" And surprisingly, he did. Over the next hour, Daniel found himself opening up about Rebecca, about Kyle, about feeling invisible in his own marriage. Emma listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions, offering perspectives that felt refreshing after months of being dismissed. "My ex did something similar," Emma shared. "Had this friend who was always around, always texting. When I said it bothered me, I was jealous and controlling." But when I made a male friend at work, suddenly he understood boundaries perfectly. What happened? I realized the person who can't handle what they dish out isn't worth the energy. She smiled sadly. Took me 2 years to learn that lesson. They talked until the cleaning crew arrived, and Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in months. Heard. Understood. Like his feelings actually mattered. Over the next few weeks, Emma became a genuine friend. They'd grab coffee, discuss everything from architecture to philosophy, share frustrations about work and life. Daniel told Rebecca about Emma immediately, described her, their conversations, even showed Rebecca her picture on the company website. "That's nice," Rebecca said distractedly, scrolling through her phone. "It's good you have friends." The irony wasn't lost on Daniel. One evening, Emma invited him to an art gallery opening. Her cousin was exhibiting, and she didn't want to go alone. Daniel checked with Rebecca first. She had plans with Kyle anyway, some movie premiere he'd gotten tickets for. The gallery was in a converted warehouse, walls lined with abstract paintings that played with light and shadow. Emma wore a simple black dress that was elegant without trying too hard, and she moved through the space with confident ease. "What do you think?" she asked, standing before a particularly striking piece. Swirls of blue and gold that seemed to capture both chaos and peace. "It's beautiful. Makes me think about transition. How things have to break apart before they can become something new." Emma looked at him thoughtfully. "Is that what you're feeling? Like things are breaking apart?" "Maybe. Or maybe they've been broken for a while, and I'm just now admitting it." They wandered through the exhibit, their conversation flowing naturally between art, architecture, and deeper things. Emma's laugh was genuine, her attention undivided. She asked about his dreams, his designs, the person he wanted to be. Questions Rebecca hadn't asked in years. As the evening ended and they stood in the cool night air outside the gallery, Daniel realized something had shifted. Not in how he felt about Emma, their friendship remained firmly platonic, but in how he felt about himself. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like he was asking for too much. He felt like someone worth listening to. "Thanks for tonight," he said. "I needed this." "Anytime, Daniel. That's what friends do." He drove home wondering if Rebecca would even notice he'd been gone. Rebecca noticed. It started with small comments. "You're seeing Emma again." Or "Another coffee with your friend." The quotation marks were audible, dripping with implications Daniel found bitterly familiar. "Yes, she's my friend," Daniel said one morning, deliberately keeping his tone neutral. "Just like Kyle is yours." Rebecca's eyes flashed. "That's completely different." "How?" "Kyle and I have known each other for years. This Emma person just appeared. Emma and I work together. We've been colleagues for over a year. And I've told you everything about our friendship." "Told me?" Rebecca laughed sharply. "You mean announced it? Like I'm supposed to just accept that you're spending all this time with some woman?" "The way I accepted Kyle." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Rebecca's face flushed red, and Daniel could see her struggling to find the argument that would make her behavior acceptable while condemning his. "Where were you last night?" she demanded suddenly. "You came home after 11. "I told you. Emma's cousin had an art show." "An art show? How convenient." Rebecca crossed her arms. "Were you alone with her?" "Yes. Just like you're alone with Kyle." "That's different. Kyle would never, I would never," she stopped, seemingly realizing where that sentence was leading. "Never what, Rebecca?" "Because I've never crossed any line with Emma either. She's a friend. Someone who listens to me, who makes me feel like I matter. Isn't that what you said about Kyle? That he just understands you?" Rebecca's expression shifted from anger to something more complex, fear, perhaps, or recognition. "I don't like this. I don't like how much time you're spending with her. Now you know how I felt for 8 months. It's not the same." But Daniel could see she knew it was exactly the same. The rules she'd established for herself, the late-night conversations, the emotional intimacy, the dismissal of a spouse's discomfort, suddenly felt different when applied to her. That evening, Rebecca went through Daniel's phone. He found her in the bedroom, scrolling through his messages with Emma. The violation would have enraged him once, but now he felt only weary acceptance. "Looking for something?" he asked from the doorway. Rebecca jumped, guilt flashing across her face before defensiveness replaced it. "I have a right to know what you're doing. I've told you what I'm doing. Openly. Honestly. Every time." He sat on the bed beside her. "Show me your messages with Kyle." "That's private." "Exactly." The hypocrisy hung between them like smoke. Rebecca set his phone down slowly, unable to meet his eyes. For the first time, she seemed to grasp the double standard she'd been living by. "I don't like how this feels," she whispered finally. "Then you understand." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "That feeling, the uncertainty, the worry, the wondering if you're being replaced, that's what I've been living with. The difference is, I'm not hiding anything." "So what? You're just doing this to prove a point." "No. I'm doing this because Emma is actually my friend, and because I refuse to live by rules that only apply to me." He paused. "But I'll tell you what. I'll set boundaries with Emma the moment you set them with Kyle. Real boundaries. The kind that respect a marriage." Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. They both knew what that would require, what she'd have to give up. The question was whether she'd value their marriage enough to try. The tension escalated over the next 2 weeks. Rebecca started monitoring Daniel's schedule obsessively. She'd call during lunch, asking where he was, who he was with. She wanted to know every detail about Emma, where she lived, her relationship status, her intentions. The same transparency she'd refused to offer about Kyle, she now demanded regarding Emma. "This is exhausting," Daniel said one evening after another interrogation. They were in the living room, the TV playing to an audience of neither. "Do you hear yourself? You're upset about something you've been doing for months." "It's not the same," Rebecca insisted, but her conviction was wavering. "Kyle never, we never." "Never what?" Daniel pressed. "Never had an emotional connection that excluded me. Never shared intimacy that should have been saved for us. Because that's exactly what you've been doing." Rebecca stood abruptly, pacing. "I'm calling your bluff. You want me to end things with Kyle? Fine. Done. Now you end things with Emma." Daniel felt a pang of surprise. "You're serious?" "Completely. No more Kyle. No more Emma. We go back to how things were." "How things were?" Daniel repeated slowly. "You mean when I was uncomfortable and you called me controlling? When my feelings didn't matter but yours did? That's not a marriage, Rebecca. That's me being subordinate to your comfort." "Then what do you want?" she shouted, her composure finally cracking. Tears streamed down her face. "You want me to admit I was wrong? Fine. I was wrong. I didn't see how it felt because I didn't want to see. Are you happy?" Daniel felt his own eyes burning. "No. I'm not happy. I'm tired, Becca. Tired of fighting for basic respect. Tired of being gaslit into thinking my feelings don't matter." "I never meant," her voice broke. "I love you. You know that." "Do I?" The question hung heavy between them. Because love respects boundaries. Love doesn't dismiss hurt. Love doesn't maintain intimate friendships that damage the marriage while calling the other person insecure for objecting. Rebecca sank onto the couch, her face in her hands. When she looked up, her expression was raw and vulnerable. "When did we get here? When did we become people who hurt each other? When you chose Kyle over us. When you made me feel crazy for having normal concerns." Daniel sat beside her, close but not touching. "And maybe when I didn't fight harder at the start. When I let you convince me that my boundaries were unreasonable." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of their failing marriage settling around them like dust. "I need to tell you something," Rebecca said finally, her voice barely audible. "Kyle kissed me. Last month. At that premiere." Daniel felt the words like a physical blow. "Did you?" "I pushed him away. Told him it was inappropriate." "But Daniel." She looked at him with anguished eyes. For a second, I almost didn't. And that terrified me. That's when I started noticing you and Emma, and I realized what I'd been doing to us. The confession hung between them. Part of Daniel wanted to rage, to let his hurt and anger consume everything. But another part felt only tired recognition that they'd arrived at the inevitable conclusion of months of eroded boundaries. I need time, Daniel said quietly. To think. To figure out if we can fix this. Can we? Rebecca's voice was small, frightened. I don't know. But not like this. Not with lies between us anymore. That night, Daniel slept in the guest room, listening to Rebecca cry through the walls. 3 months later, Daniel sat across from Rebecca in their marriage counselor's office. The space was warm and neutral, filled with plants and soft lighting designed to feel safe. They'd been coming here every week since that painful night of confession. Dr. Patricia Chen, their therapist, had helped them unpack layers of hurt, misunderstanding, and unmet needs. The sessions were difficult, often ending with both of them emotionally drained. But they were also illuminating. I think I understand now, Rebecca said during one session, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I needed Kyle because I felt invisible at work. The marketing director never valued my ideas, and Kyle made me feel smart and capable. But I used that friendship to avoid dealing with deeper issues, in my career and in our marriage. And when Daniel expressed discomfort, Dr. Chen prompted gently. I turned it back on him. Made him the problem instead of examining my behavior. Rebecca looked at Daniel with clear, honest eyes. I convinced myself that if I wasn't physically cheating, nothing was wrong. But emotional infidelity is still betrayal. Daniel felt something unclench in his chest. These words, this understanding, it was what he'd needed for months. Not perfection, but acknowledgement. What about Emma? Dr. Chen asked Daniel. Where does she fit in this? Daniel considered carefully. Emma was genuine friendship. But I won't lie, part of why I welcomed it was to show Rebecca how it felt. That wasn't entirely fair to Emma or to myself. He paused. We still talk, but I've been more conscious about boundaries. About not using friendship as a weapon or a refuge from marriage problems. And Kyle? Dr. Chen looked at Rebecca. I ended that friendship completely. Not because Daniel demanded it, but because I realized it had become unhealthy. I was getting emotional needs met outside my marriage instead of communicating with my husband. Rebecca's voice was steady. I've also started looking for a new job. That environment was toxic in ways I didn't want to admit. The following weeks brought gradual healing. Rebecca started therapy individually to address why she'd sought validation externally. Daniel worked through his own patterns, his tendency to avoid conflict until resentment built, his difficulty expressing needs directly. They established real boundaries together. Open phones. Transparency about friendships. Regular check-ins about how each felt. Most importantly, they committed to uncomfortable conversations instead of dismissive ones. One evening, they sat on their balcony watching the city lights, sharing wine as the sun set. Rebecca reached for Daniel's hand. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For all of it. For dismissing your pain. For the hypocrisy when you found your own friend. For almost throwing us away. I'm sorry too, Daniel replied. For letting things get so bad before standing up for myself. For using Emma as a mirror to show you your behavior instead of just demanding respect from the start. Do you think we'll make it? Rebecca asked, vulnerability clear in her voice. Daniel squeezed her hand. I think we're finally fighting for the right things. Not to win arguments, but to understand each other. That's a start. Rebecca smiled, genuinely, for the first time in months. I love you. I forgot to show you that, but I never stopped. I love you too. But love isn't enough without respect. Without boundaries. Without both of us being willing to do the work. Then let's do the work, Rebecca said. Together. For real this time. As they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not naive certainty that everything would be perfect, but genuine hope that they could build something stronger from the broken pieces. Sometimes people only understand respect when they feel what disrespect costs. Sometimes marriages have to break a little to heal properly. And sometimes, the uncomfortable truth is the only path to real intimacy. They were finally learning that lesson together.